in reading some stuff that you've done with interviews about this album already, in one you said, "I've waited a long time to heave this music into the world," which I thought was a really interesting choice of word, and because it implies a weight to this, and I'm wondering, in from your perspective, what gives this album its weight?
Well, it's part of it is the wait because there's been such a long time. One factor is that I haven't put out a proper full album in a long time. It didn't set out to be that way, but several something happened here and there as you go along. And like I said, it wasn't the intention, but it's been a while. I've put a bunch of singles out in the meantime and done other things, but this album as a whole has been there on the burner. It's been kind of an adventure. So that gives it some of the weight. And I'm, because of that time in between, I feel like this one means a lot to me. And hey, maybe for me or for the world, who knows? It might be the last like record album, because I know it's a singles world. And, but me and the producer, David Abeda, were just determined on this one to only get it in a situation to release it where it would be an album, sequenced like we wanted. We felt like the songs run like a set, like a real actual live set, and it had intention that way. So we kind of held to our guns on that, and being able to put a full statement into the world for a while. Yeah, I do. I can't wait to sort of just heave it out there against the wall and see what happens.
Yeah, and I'm all for, God, I'm still a big supporter of albums and still buy CDs and vinyl and all that because it's, I like being taken on a journey, a musical journey, if you will. So, I mean, I get it that it's a singles world, but there's an art form to albums and to putting it together.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the fun of it. I mean, the packaging, I still believe in, and like the sequencing and that there's a theme to it. I love that, right? From the time I was a kid and sitting there with the liner notes. And, I can still, like you can, I'm sure all our favorite albums when we're kids, right? You can remember the sequence when that song on the radio ends and like what next one's coming on, like,
Yeah.
come up. I think it's great. I wish it stayed that way, and, but this one is our best shot at doing something that way. 'Cause, I think that's really the fun of it.
Yeah. And it has some really interesting different kind of songs, as you go through it all. So the one that you've talked about, staying with the theme of waiting a long time to heave this into the world, is Take Me Back, and uh the health detour that you had to go on, which kind of took you off the road and off the recording studio, which kind of got you thinking about this, inspired the song. And I'm wondering, how did that challenge and getting through that affect you as a musician?
A lot because I've said it before, but because of this life that I've been a musician all my life. I've never had a real job unless you count. I lifeguarded 2 summers.
Oh, okay.
Other than that, I've been able to skate around any sort of heavy labor of any kind, and and it's a tough life, and there are many setbacks. So it's not all a big joyride, but I've lived pretty much like a wild-eyed teenager for a long time, and to have that was the first setback really for me, like an adult thing. And I always remind myself that everybody has something. Whether it's big or small, you hope it's not. You hope it's something small, but something's going to happen, like, health-wise
Mm.
or otherwise. So, you know, I felt so relieved the first time when I lived in New York City. The first time I got mugged, because then like the pressure was off. Because like it's kind of, so, until it
Wow, that's a note of optimism I have never heard applied to that scenario.
No, I mean, I couldn't keep my head on a swivel any longer. It was wearing me out. So
All right.
when it happened, I just felt like good. So, statistically, now I'm in the clear. And I felt, I think I felt that way a little bit with having a health challenge. I had something serious, and it makes you, I didn't feel down about it. I felt like, all right, maybe not to that extent. I'd have preferred not to have it, but I felt like, okay, here's your thing. So what are you going to do? And but when you look back on it, how do you want to remember that you behaved? and
Yeah.
how did you take on the challenge? And can you look back and be proud of what you did and how you got through it? And I thought hard about that. It was around the time that we had also not long after, and I was still toying with the song. We'd been playing it a little by then, but we lost our drummer that we had for many, many years, our friend. And so there was a lot of sudden adult themes being introduced. So, I think it helped me that way to think things can be serious, and everybody has it, and everyone I'm singing to has it, and has an event, something in their lives, and I appreciated the chance to be able to write a song that addressed it, and it's still, we played it a few weeks ago on the road, and I mean there was just a 3-day run, and each night somebody came up to me, and we were playing with Chris Knight, and
Hmm.
Chris is fantastic, and his crowd is fantastic, but they're not pushovers. These are they're relatively tough breed. But each night, some guy would come up to me and say, like, I have a friend in this situation, or I have, a family member, and it touched me, so much, and that happens a lot when we play it. So that sets some of the tone for the album.
Mm.
If you're going to spend this much
Yeah.
time with that album, a lot of life is going to transpire in between. So that's my long answer to your good question.
And again, kind of sticking with the idea of adapting to changes. I found it really interesting that you were talking about the song "Take a Little Love," and you said that you wrote it as a gentle country rock tune, but that David, the producer, heard it as a big ballad, and you went with it. Which,
Yeah.
number one, is I think that's kind of rare that someone would create this tune and then someone says no, it needs to be completely different in its arrangement. You know, what did you do to wrap your mind around? Okay, it needs to be sung in a completely different way, or I need to think about it in a completely different way. And what did he say to convince you that he was right about that?
Well, it's a really good question, and it's really interesting to me because first off, I am not set up to be adverse to a big ballad at all. That it was more like me saying, let me think. Don't do the obvious thing. This could be this. I thought of it as a little ditty, but I tend to think first of a big ballad. I love them. I'm a sucker for the big, 9 o'clock number, as they say on Broadway. but um, but but it did, yeah. It came. I thought of it as the smaller sort of train country song, and David coming up with the idea, and how did I go along with it? Well, the whole theme of this album for me, in terms of making it, and my relationship with David and finding him and all that whole story was based on that. I'd co-produced with some good people the first
Hmm.
albums I put out, but I had a lot of input. They were guys in the band and really brilliant guys, but they were in my band, and it was almost like one point of view, which can be great, but I had grown tired of. I just wanted. It's another reason I took so long in between. I just felt like I'd said that, and if you don't have another new thing to say, then what's the point, of just putting out a record? That's where I was at. I felt like everybody's got a CD now that they made in their bedroom, and there's a lot of noise. So that was my
Yeah.
do something. But I was determined to find somebody, and there were a couple starts and stops with good people, but where it just wasn't that click. I was just determined to find another input, someone I trusted musically, and then bite the bullet, and not override that, which is what I've always done. Because I always have a full thing idea in my head, and I wanted the other input. and I wasn't going to then cheat myself by sort of half-assing that. So, I mean, as it turned out, David and I worked together really well and give and take. But when certain things would come up like that, where I might have had to take the wheel before, I would tell myself, this is why you asked him to do this. This is why I didn't win a lottery to get David to come produce the record. It was a choice on both our parts. So
Yeah.
I just told myself going in like, all right, put in your input on everything, but then that's why you wanted to do this. I guess that's a long way of saying just outside of your comfort zone, but I was just committed to it. And I was such a fan of things David had produced and of his band he was in for 20 years, Reckless Kelly, my favorite band, that when once in a while when I'd get to that intersection of something like that and I'd say, well, you're a huge fan of the music that this guy's been part of making so how horribly off the rails could it go? So and that on that one, I just said, yeah, let's try it. And, it was absolutely right to me because, not every song is going to stand up as a big ballad. I think, there's
Yeah.
lots of mediocre big ballads, but I hope that one people feel is special. And I think I did the right thing by, I look back and go, good. I'm glad I didn't say, no, this here is a country song.
Right. But
Like,
yeah, it's a very mature way of dealing with things because you've heard so many stories of people getting into fights in the studio. No, this is the way I pictured it, and this is the way it's going to go, and stuff, and it just seems so different to hear someone say, "Well, this is why I hired this guy." I wanted this kind of different perspective.
trust.
Um,
I mean, if you don't, what's the point otherwise? If you have to trust the musical ideas that you ask the guy to be there to, not to just to give you or override you, but to check you. Because, like I said, I'd concluded the 3 albums I put out, people who heard them seemed to really like them, but I don't see how the business was changed. There weren't girls shrieking at the airport, so there's room for other thoughts here. So I
yeah.
minute till boy, let's see if I can make something decent. Let's see what two like-minded people, and it has to be someone that you trust, and we developed that trust really quickly.
Hmm. And there's an interesting kind of musical choice in that tune. It toward the very end, as you're singing the lyric, it's not too late, and you hang on to the word late, and it becomes this kind of harmony chorus with a few different voices layered on. And it starts to kind of rise in power and volume, and you expect it to just keep going, but then you kind of put a ceiling on it, and it just kind of it's like, no, we're only going this far. And it's an interesting choice, and as a listener it's not one that you predict or see coming, and I'm wondering what drove the decision to work it that way.
that's fascinating. I'd have to think. I mean, I think number one, I have a terrible time writing short songs. Every time I blink my eyes, it's 4.5 minutes. So and I grew up on AM radio. You think I'd have a more concise, but just I think that one sort of had its big moment, and then there's like a denouement. There's like a little bit of
Hmm.
like after the last commercial on the TV show, and they come back to wrap it up. And I thought, I guess our feeling was like, yeah, we've said it, and we've taken you on, hopefully, on this ride, and now we're just sort of there's the handshake at the end, and we leave it to you.
Okay, yeah, yeah. And it I don't know, and it works that way, but it also kind of catches the ear. It's like, okay, this is not what you would expect. It's not predictable. It's not obvious choice. But I think that's what makes it all the more interesting.
Yeah, I hope so. Um, I hope so. I think I know what you mean, but I feel like yeah, if it's a big gulp. That one's a mouthful. Music.
Yeah.
Why not just my brother Mark Douglas Berardo has a saying that we all adhere to, and he always says the great showbiz trick is to blow a kiss and hit the road. Sometimes sometimes get out while the getting's good.
Right, right. Okay, I like that line. That's cool. Yeah. Um, and then there this album is filled with different ways of kind of acknowledging passage of time and kind of exploring some deep issues that people may deal with. And one that kind of stuck out to me was the song "Somebody Like Me," which is this interesting kind of paradox. The idea that you need someone else to help you see yourself or to help you see your potential. And but it is a common issue. I mean, just talking friends, family, and stuff like that. It's something a lot of people deal with. And it's cool that this song addresses it. But I'm curious from your perspective, why is it such a common issue?
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, first off, it sometimes the song makes me chuckle. The audacity of the thing
Yeah.
is some is a fellow like me. It's already kind of funny, and the aforementioned Mark, my brother, he always reads the title and he always says to the band, "Okay, we're going to play Somebody Like Me." but, but I think it's a love song, because it's saying like, I think it's saying I see a value in you that I don't think you're perceiving. I see, which I think, and to answer your question, I think sometimes we're the worst, like in anything, like we were talking about with producing music. Sometimes you're in the vortex, you're too close to the source
Mm,
to see the real details, and I think people do that all the time, right? Like they need a trusted, honest source from the outside to say sometimes a criticism, and then sometimes to say, hey, I know so many situations like this in my life where I'll have to say to somebody, you're I don't know who fed you this bill of goods, that like you're not good at this, or oh, don't even try that. Like I see exactly who you are, and how amazing you are at this or that. And good friends, people I'm close to, family, but I think even sometimes casually with people on a casual level, I try to be somebody who'll say like, you're aware that you're real good at that, right? Or, boy, was that song something? Or aren't you quite a roller skater? I don't know, but like
right, right.
because I think people, we all work from a pretty hefty well of self doubt. I think, I mean, most people, smart people, are
Right.
to have some healthy self doubt. And I think that song's somebody saying like, don't miss, life's a struggle. We're gonna, have a lot of setbacks. Don't miss the stuff you're great at, and don't let somebody confuse you into thinking that you're not. And even if it's just, hey, maybe no one does see a certain thing, but I do. I mean, that can really unlock a person. I'm sure it's happened to me, and I think that's what, like I say, it's kind of a love song. It's somebody who sees right through everything about a person, right? And maybe you're the only,
Yeah.
like, two people, and you get it. I get it.
And regarding this big struggle, and as you've said, you chose not the easiest business in the world in which to make a living. um in another interview, you had said, in this business you really need to have the sense of hope and a sense of belief and a sense of joy in what you're doing. And what I thought was interesting about that is I've heard a lot of people say sense of hope, sense of belief. You're the first, I think, that I've come across that says that adds that third part of you really need a sense of joy. And what makes that such a key factor in that whole equation?
Well, I mean, joy's the payoff, right? So it's a lot easier to believe, when you chronicle the joyful moments. Like I said, I've never really had a proper job, and with all the setbacks, like we've talked about, I've still, I mean, there isn't a morning in my life, and a lot of it, there's been a lot of tears and family arguments, and being poor after life, but every day I get up, I'm excited, even when things are going bad. Like, what might go right today? What might get fixed? It's full of potential, because anything could happen at any time. It's so exciting. You could write the song that changes your life, or the musician that changes your life. It gets me choked up because it's that's the payback, man. And then it's easy to believe when every day, starts with potential. So I think, and you're cheating yourself if you don't recognize the joy when it's happening, because I'm sure in other walks of life it's a challenge, but it's there somewhere. But for me, I've been able to pretty easily identify the payback, which is it's not the money or getting a really good table in a restaurant. I don't know.
Right.
It's the doing of it. The process. If you don't like the process in this, then you're a fool. Then you're wasting your life. Because nothing may ever happen, but you enjoy the doing and working with other artists, singing songs for people that might touch them in some way. There's the payoff. The rest is gravy. So I think don't miss the joy. I've seen people do it, man. I'm no smarter than anybody else, but I've seen guys in this racket, and I'll just think, well, look at you. You kind of got it made. I always say, like, somebody hears you talking, like they're gonna push you down.
Yeah, right.
Because there's always somebody to which, including me, man. I'll be playing somewhere, and somebody, when you think it might be a rough gig, and somebody be like, dude, I can't believe you've been doing this for so long. You got it made, bro. And I think, yeah, absolutely, I do.
Right.
But if you don't keep your eyes open, you might miss that. And so, yeah, it's the joy's out there. Don't cheat yourself. Don't let it slip by.
Yeah. Yeah. But it is a good reminder that it does take a little bit of effort to keep
Yeah,
your eye on it. It's that.
keep,
Yeah.
keep your spider senses tingling.
Right.
Yeah,
And then, delving into your process and everything. So I read that you write a lot of songs using the piano. Um, but what's interesting is most of your music, it's guitar driven. The guitar is what is up front. So I'm wondering, what is the advantage to composing on the piano and then converting it to guitar?
I don't think there's any advantage. There probably, yes, I'm sure there is. It's an odd thing. And when I first ever started writing songs, I'd usually have a guitar partner when I was very young. And I'd hum stuff. I'd sing words and melodies to them, and we'd ham and egg it, as they say on the golf course. But and when I developed like a language I could talk to guitar players, because it's a guitar idiom, and and that is the kind of music that I started out making, and kind of done a lot of things, but that's sort of always been the basis of it. So it's strange, but if there's an advantage, it's that I don't. The disadvantage is definitely that I don't write super cool guitar licks and things that own, things that are the song, like Satisfaction or something, and sometimes they're a little harder for a guitar guy to adapt. But even ever since I was real young, and before I had more of a language of my own about music, I would see the guy in my cover band when I was a kid or something, or well, at least by this time it was my songs, just getting confused and saying like, well, you can't do that because that, and I'd say, well, I don't know what you're talking about, because you can. And
Right.
I know I can. I'm doing it here. And invariably they look at the piano and go, oh, well, see, he's playing a seventh, but it's like, I don't care.
Right.
And because I think it keeps me from having, easy guitar driven language, but it also keeps me from bad, lazy guitar habits. So,
Yeah.
have a different kind of structure and approach, and usually and I think that's fun for me, because when you do translate them to an electric guitar or an acoustic guitar, they have a little different sound. They have my brother, as all these years playing together, is always saying to me, well, that's so piano-y, but he digs it. Like, he's like, well, that's fun to figure that on the guitar and how it would best lay out, what inversion would speak to that and say that. So it started just because when I was a kid, I wasn't a guitar player. It seemed like you'd have to take lessons and then carry it around. I don't know, you'd lose it. So it's just a habit I fell into. I try to think a lot of times I'll think of the song in my head first and hear the guitars, and then go to the piano and try to find the equivalent. You know,
Mm.
I just show it to a guitar player I'm working with, one of the guys in the band. But I think it gives me a fresh perspective, you know, sometimes, and stops from, you know, lazy habits. And um, I think it's odd. I know it's odd.
No, but I think it's cool, and I think that's, you know, I love that aspect of someone saying, "Well, you can't do that," and you'd be like, "No, actually, I did," and you know,
Yeah, like I'm
because
doing
I
a guitar sounds like.
right,
Yeah, there are so
but
many
I
things piano that are like guitar players will tell you, like, well, you wouldn't think of that on a guitar, or it's really kind of hard to play. And I got to think you wouldn't have done that writing it on the guitar. But so it pushes, like, you know, if I were a guitar player, it'd be the equivalent of me saying like, okay, that sounds good, but you know, let me think outside the box. I can do it a different way. And I think it has advantages and disadvantages. You know, like sometimes I wish I could just, you know, have that a couple hot guitar licks and not have to work so hard.
right. But on the other hand, I think that's what makes, you know, genuine songs, genuine musicians, you know, still interesting and uh, um, fascinating, really, and always relevant. You know, when they talk about, you know, all this AI created music, it's like, well, no AI is going to do this
Yeah.
because it doesn't fit any kind of formula. But that's why it's cool. It's like, no, it just sounds good, and no formula would say to do this, but that's what makes it human. You know?
And lucky me, because like on this album that we're talking about, because David, the producer, is, you know, 20 years in Reckless Kelly, and he is a one of he had always been, like I said, I'm a big fan, and I numbered him among my handful of favorite guitar players in the world before I met him. Really, you know.
Hmm.
So because of that, I bring him the songs all finished, but then he puts his, you know, guitar genius into the mix. And it isn't like it doesn't have that element. Like he knows how to craft us, you know, a separate piece almost of music that lays on that and is seamless. And so you get that the guitar rock thing that I want. That's what I was after, is trying to find in a couple different ways these medium points of different kinds of music that ring my bell. So, you know, so that David brought to the table unfailingly every time.
Cool, cool. Um, and then one thing I was just curious about, I really like the song Underachiever, and I was wondering who sings the other lead part on that.
That is I consider one of my best friends in the world and one of the coolest people on the planet, and absolutely one of the best singer songwriters in America. That's Walt Wilkins, my buddy down in Austin, Texas. Uh,
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know if you haven't heard Walt. I suggest it strongly. You've probably heard his songs. He's been covered by a lot of people, Kenny Rogers, and like just a lot of. He's a great songwriter, and I think he's the best in a state like Texas, which is full of really good singer songwriters. I think Walt stands out completely, and he's a buddy, and he came down because we did the album in Austin, and he came down the studio with the promise of nothing more than an afternoon of beer drinking. And he's also one of the when you hear singer songwriter, a lot of times you know, the guy's a stylist or something, and Walt has a very definite style. But I've told him a million times, I just think alone that he's one of the best singers. He is just in rock and folk and country music. I think he is maybe the preeminent like voice. Uh,
Hmm.
so he came down. I just had thought of it. I guess David probably said, you know, maybe this is a duet we got in our head somehow. And I don't know if it was that or we were looking for something we wanted to do with Walt and get him in there. But
Yeah.
way, it turned out great because it's sort of a conversation, and it you know, it's not easy to go toe to toe vocally on a record with a guy like that too.
Yeah, but also what makes it cool is you guys don't have, you know, exactly the same voice. Yours has a bit more edge to it. You know, his is a little bit more smoother, but that's why it makes kind of this cool compliment.
Well,
Uh,
I'm an edgy guy.
yeah.
But I think so. Yeah, it did. I felt it. It really did. We were so happy with it. And the record's taken so long and such a wandering time to come out that you're making me think that I got to call old Walt and remind him that he's on it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, would he do any shows with you?
Yeah, we played shows together many times, on the same bill. Um, and I just go to see him whenever I can. So I'm hoping we'll get him to come sing that song. We played with him in Austin the last couple South by Southwest, and the song already exists.
Okay.
I just wasn't clever enough to remember, like, hey, Walt, get over here and please come sing this song. But I near future, definitely. So yeah, that was one of the cool things about doing the record in Austin. Certain musicians that we were able to have right there. I mean, it's of course, it's my home away from home and a hotbed of the kind of that matters to me.
Yeah, yeah. And there was you had this other great line, which I found in another interview where it said when you were choosing songs for the album, you said something to the effect of, "We just picked the 10 best that would sound good driving in your car with the windows down," which I thought was a great way to I don't know, it just captures this kind of whole feeling and atmosphere that the album has. And I'm wondering, how often do you think about the setting the listener might be in when they're experiencing your songs?
I think about that a lot, and it's funny.
Mm,
Like I said, that we really did want this to be like an album with a sequence that made sense, an arc to it. And the great thing was we picked the songs that we felt strongest about. Maybe we moved one or two in for this purpose, but we were aware of like making it be like an album. But the strongest ones happened to. I mean, I remember literally we got it mixed and mastered. We're ready to go, and we're about to master it, and the sequence. And I just sat down on the porch, and I literally remember just giving it a first run. Like, let me write down the 10 songs what I would do if we had a show that night. And these were the songs. And I went 1 through 10, and then I looked at it and went, "That seems exactly right." And I sent it to Dave, and he's like, "Yeah, that seems exactly right."
mm.
Because it was sort of we had in our mind like all right, we've got these three ballads, and then we've got this song that's a little more rootsy and Americana with steel. It just wasn't calculated, but it was just how do we fill out this overall feeling we're trying to have.
Right, right.
And I think of that. I think of the listener listening to it as an album, and like the way I would at a show, like well, we just played this, we can't do that feel again, or now we just hopefully quieted the room down maybe with something kind of heavy, so now let's blast out some something wild. So I do think of that, and when I'm writing a song, I think of that too. Years ago, when I had done a lot of different kinds of music, and I'd lived in New York and LA, and you're affected by the infected. You're affected by and and I was trying to really refine. I had to restart really, and came home from LA, just sort of clear the decks, and wanted to really think about what I wanted to do. And one way I did that was by playing gigs in the bars, and I'd think like, what do I want to sing to these? Like, look at the room. So when I'd go home to write, and I'd think, all right, say I'm standing up there in that club or that bar, like, what do I want to lay on them right now? Like, I'd picture it, and that would help things to come that were, because my mind musically can be a million places, and I love all of it so much, and I'd write something and be like, I love that, but like, not everything is going to translate into, and I determined to write things that'll translate into a room. Like, I want to, whether it's a big room, 2,000
Hmm.
people, or a bar with 25 people, like I want stuff that translates like that. So in that way, I do think about it. I think like, what do I want to sound like and say to folks if they're here?